Welcome to Parents Make a Difference. I'm your host, JosiePV. When our kids are small, they have big dreams, but as they get older, they start to lose their childhood dreams due to societal, peer, and family pressures. What is the difference between those that achieve what they want and those that don't? Well, today's guest has definitely had great achievements when it comes to his childhood dreams. If you had the opportunity to hear from someone who was part of the winning Stanley Cup team, not once, but twice, would you want to hear his story and the advice he is giving his kids when it comes to achieving their goals? I certainly would. We have the privilege of listening to someone who has worked for the Los Angeles Kings for 13 years. His last position was assistant general manager, and now he is an NHL analyst commentator for Sportsnet. Yes, that's right. I am excited to welcome my guest, Michael Futa.
Thanks, Josie. It's always nice to be able to talk to one of my former Henry Carr alumni, especially obviously you talk about achieving great battles, and what you've overcome is far greater than anything I've done, but congratulations on your strength, and I look forward to talking to you about this.
Oh, thank you. For anyone who doesn't know it, he's talking about, Michael's talking about overcoming cancer. Yes, I'm thankful to be here, and I want to get excited about life. I'm passionate. I want these kids to get passionate about life, right? Because we don't know how long we're around for.
Oh, absolutely. And it's especially, I think now it's almost like coming out of this COVID. I hope we're coming out of it. You want to come out shot out of a cannon. You don't want to come out wobbling and still feeling sorry. I mean, everybody's been through tough times, but this is a time that you should have had a lot of time to look at goals and think how you want to achieve goals and come out with all guns blazing.
Yes, absolutely. Now, so you got to be part of the team when they won 2 Stanley Cups. Wow, how did that feel? I'm sure you got asked this often, but
Well, you can't put it into words. I mean, it's obviously, when you think about it, you talk about growing up and you hear the guys, the players that won. I mean, when you play street hockey or ball hockey on the street growing up, your dream is to score the goal to win a Stanley Cup. And I mean, I played at a very high level. I mean, I went to Henry Carr for their hockey program, and it was always a dream to make it as a player. I ended up having a great career at Henry Carr, and I think it was the contacts that I made there through the teaching staff and the principalship, which we talked about, which I'd certainly like to allude to, that basically opened up the door for me down the road. I just really quickly, I went to Carr. I ended up getting suspended in my last year as a 20-year-old for a bit of hijinks with the Crusaders at Reston Arena, and I ended up losing a scholarship to Yale.
oh, really?
And it was unfortunate, but it was my own doing. It was part of a growth process with regards to, living and learning. And fortunately, I ended up going to York, and I was captain of the university team there, and we won a national championship, and I got my teaching degree. My dad was very adamant that this hockey dream that I had, that I made sure that I got a degree to back it up with if it fell flat, and ended up playing professional hockey in Europe. And I was playing in Germany and Denmark with named James Richmond. He was actually another captain from Henry Carr. We were living together and playing against each other over in Europe. And I ended up dislocating my shoulder and coming back. And I thought I was going to go back and continue a playing career. And I got a call from Peter Miller, who was our athletic director at St. Mike at Henry Carr. And he said, "Mike, I want to bring you in and talk to you about something." And I went into Henry Carr, and it was still at the old location. And he said, "I want to bring you down to St. Mike's. They're starting a junior A hockey program, a major junior program." And Father Ted McLean, who was my mentor and my principal at Henry Carr, who was just an incredible man. He was just an incredible role model for me. When he passed away, he was actually killed at the crosswalk just outside of our old high school there in a fatal accident when he was out for a run. And I was devastated at the time. I ended up putting one of my national championship rings in his casket with him. And I knew he always had my back, but to the extent that he had my back, it was unbelievable. So here we are 8 years later, and I'm sitting at St. Mike's, and he had left a note that this Henry Carr alumnus, and he actually, I found out he'd done the same thing for he's an actor now. He was a president of our student council. His name was Enrico Colantoni, I believe his name, and he ended up, he's a major TV star, and Father McLean had done some work to help him as well. And it was basically, if Mike Futa comes back looking for a job, hire him at St. Mike's, because he was a true Henry Carr Crusader and the Basilian Fathers. You know, he'd make them proud. And they brought me in and interviewed me at St. Mike's and hired me to run their hockey program.
You were the first coach?
I was the assistant coach. I coached the Buzzards, and then they ended up switching to the Ontario Hockey League, which was a completely different animal. And it was an expansion team. And I was hired as assistant coach, and Mark Napier, Stanley Cup champion, was the head coach. And he was moved down, and shortly, at 27 years old, I was named the head coach of the St. Michael's Majors. And we were an expansion team, and we were getting just destroyed every night. So this was like a great experience, but a tough experience for me, and a lot of adversity. And I ended up getting fired, hired by the Oshawa Generals as assistant coach, assistant general manager, where I really had a great opportunity to get involved with the management side. And I was in charge of the under 17 programs and the under 18 programs, Hockey Canada. Ended up getting offered a position. I was offered some head coaching jobs, and this was a real point in my career where I had to decide, if you get back into coaching and get fired again, it might be all over. But if somebody allows you to run your own program. So I was hired as the general manager for the Owen Sound Attack in the Ontario Hockey League. And basically, under a wonderful ownership group, I was allowed to build my entire program, hire my own staff. And, you know, that's kind of where it turned around for me. And I had no shortcuts. There wasn't any of the shortcuts that I thought about taking as a player. And there was a door open for me, Josie, and I was not gonna take any chances. And I mean, I ended up drafting Bobby Ryan and brought in Mark Giordano and Wayne Simmons and Trevor Lewis, and the names, like, Owen Sound had never had championship teams, and we were ranked number 2 in Canada. All these top players were being drafted into the National Hockey League under my guidance, and I had a great coaching staff. And the Los Angeles Kings came up, and they were like, consider coming to Los Angeles and running our scouting department. And then was the big, at the time I was married, I had 3 beautiful children. And here's the dream, to be in the National Hockey League. And I sat down with my wife at the time, and she said, this is something that you have to do. This was your dream. And I ended up going down there, and, you know, we were last place 3 years later after rebuilding it through the draft. And it was basically, I was really fortunate because I basically picked every kid from Ontario that I knew and had coached. And wow. I had insider trading on the character of these players. Mm-hmm. And there we are in 2012, standing on the ice with the Stanley Cup, with all these players that I had known and drafted as under 17s and under 18s. And we already had some great players there. And then we were fortunate enough, we went to the conference final in 2013. And then in 2014, we were standing out there again, a couple different players, another second Stanley Cup. And for me to be able to know that my name's on the Stanley Cup twice, I've had 2 days with the Stanley Cup that my daughters, the memories and the pictures and
I saw some pictures. It's so cool.
Probably spent a little too much money on those days, but they were so incredible. And then it just makes you want to win more, and it's pretty cool. So
it is, my goodness. And I understand, I read somewhere that your parents got to be part of when you guys won the Stanley Cup.
Exactly. The first one, my dad was running a university in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, so he wasn't there. It was like a retirement gig he had at Sunway College, and my mom and my sister and her husband were kind of following us around. And it's very expensive following around. Like, that means I'm flying them everywhere, and I'm the tickets are I'm paying for their tickets. They were on the ice with me for, you know, I flew them to the game. They watched the game in a private suite with our management and owners, and then they came down to the ice and they were in the parade, and everything about it was like a dream. Again, when you experience something like that, you have to pinch yourself, but it also just drives you because you don't want to stop there. Like, I want more. I enjoying this little stopover in the TV world. I'm used to being interviewed as such.
Do you have 3 girls?
Yes. 16-year-old and 14-year-old twins.
Oh my gosh, really? You got twins? That's a job in itself. I have 5 boys.
Wow.
We got a few hockey lovers over here, but I was excited to tell them about you. I kept talking about you because I've always believed in the power of the dream.
That's pretty much the story. I mean, just keep battling it. And that's the thing. I mean, because it's so easy for people to tell you can't do it or you're crazy and stuff like that. And then if you just if all that's just noise, you just use that to motivate yourself.
The families that had, like the Sutter family that had all 4 kids, or no, six brothers as on the team, I thought, my goodness, something those parents are doing is right. One might have talent, two might have talent, but six.
Daryl coached our Stanley Cup teams, Daryl Sutter, so I know them very
Did
well.
he?
Incredible story.
And so what do you think they did that was so powerful to have all 6 in the NHL?
Well, they're clearly, they're one of the most competitive groups. Were intense competitors. They played hard, they played rough. I think growing up on the farm, when you hear the stories about their fathers and stuff, that just the discipline and there was just no shortcuts. And they, when they got opportunities, they could score, they could fight, they could do everything. They were just nasty, take no prisoners. And they were all like Ivy League intelligent too, which was really strange because I expected these kind of farmers off the Calgary farm, and they were all like Ivy League educated. So it was pretty unique group. But
I heard you did pretty well in university. I thought I saw something about you getting an award for.
Yeah, I was academic athlete of the year my last year.
That's amazing. Wonderful. We need to hear that, right? That you can have success in all areas.
Well, my having a father who's a superintendent of schools, in order to have the ability to play the game, you had to make sure that your school was not sliding. So
you made that happen.
As much as I was willing to put in the work, I was not given too many options. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have made it. So it was all worth the work.
That's it. And it was great that he put that. You said it that your education actually helped you in your coaching career.
Well, yeah. Well, the teaching part of it, I never liked being in the classroom during my teaching. Like when I was going through teachers college, I just felt, especially when you're going in short term, you had no control over the class discipline and stuff like that. And I was so young, like I was going into high schools, and I was like, I got to watch what I say here, because on the ice, you would just say something a little bit more biting than you can say in the classroom. And it was that part of it, getting the work done. And then I just felt that there were so many intangibles when I started the coaching, the pre-planning and lesson planning just translated so well to practice planning, and all of the public speaking I had done made it, I had no worries or issues about ever sitting in front of whether it's 5 or 5,000 people. And then when you're announcing the pick of the draft and there's 18,000 people there, it was like some people it was something that excited me. I was always nervous, but nervous at the fact that I wanted to be able to just knock it out of the park, not nervous that I was going to fail. But sometimes people do that. If you put yourself that fear of failure, it drives you to be that much more prepared, I think. So if you're prepared and you've done all your homework, then it should go well. It's when you take shortcuts in your preparation that you can kind of might get exposed when you're on the big stage. And I just refused to allow myself to be put in that situation. So again, it goes back to the education that I got. Writing, for some reason, writing was very easy for me. Whether it was poetry or essays, like you could just knock them off, right? And my mom would sit there at night with a glass of wine and write essays. And I still remember the old typewriter stuff. Now we have computers and stuff, but it's got to the point now, like I forgot it was like when I go to games and I have to write notes, I forgot what it's like to write and try and read your own writing, because you're so used to technology. And I used to think my writing looked like calligraphy, and now it looks like a bird put ink on its claws and just ran across the thing. I'm like, what did I just write there? But
you can't read your writing.
They're all good. They're all good stories. Again, I'm very fortunate to think. I think I've got. First of all, my parents have been married 56 years. If the one thing I did fail at was marriage, and it wasn't due to lack of an effort. It's just sometimes when you get together with someone, it's not the match you thought it was going to be. And when you have children, you just got to find a way to just step aside from any personal things and just make sure that their life is incredible, and that they don't need to hear about any of the problems that existed. They just have to be happy. And by showing that you're happy around them and making their life better. And that's why there's nothing, like my daughters were here this weekend, and it was just like controlled chaos for 4 straight days of painting and laughter and golfing outside. And then they get going again about the Stanley Cup, and they see all the pictures of them with all the different trophies and all the different celebrities and stuff that they've met through my Los Angeles ties. And it's just hilarious. And they love it. They're very supportive. And I just can't wait to get back at it.
You will, you will. How are you helping your girls to dream big? I mean, because you're already an example, right? That's number one. You're an example to go for what you want in life.
Well, it's just it's a one it's you got to find something that you're passionate about. And for me, it was always easy to be able. Hockey was everything to me, and to be able to get a job in something that I love that much and to be able to contribute. I mean, even when you think you're having a bad day, you just go, "Are you kidding me? You're working in the National Hockey League." I mean, like, give your head a shake. Like the trivial things that happen up there. That again, like what you went through, that's real adversity. Okay, a losing streak or something like that is not. It's just putting things in perspective, but having a goal, and not just having a goal and saying, okay, I'm going to get there, but you've got to do all the homework and do all the planning into the steps along the way or how you're going to get there. And if it goes back again to preparation, and then people are telling you, you can't do that, or only, you had to play in the NHL to work in the NHL. And I'm like, no, you just have to be prepared. You need a break. You need luck. I mean, when I first started out, I always used a financial gauge that as long as I was making more than my teaching salary, then this was worthwhile, right? I wasn't short. Um, I wasn't shorting my family because you also had to have that financial thing in place to know you were going to look after your kids and
Absolutely.
your family. And I was fortunate enough that the dream for me just kept increasing and getting better, not only my role, but financially. And again, I just had to pinch myself sometimes when you're sitting up there for all the different times I used to go watch the Toronto Maple Leafs play. And now I'm pulling in on the chartered jet and staying at the Ritz-Carlton to go play against the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's a dream. It's a dream. And now if you go back and look at all the little steps and all the different snowstorms that I drove through, or trips to Moscow to find a player, or the different essays or different things that I never took any shortcuts in the process, it's well worth it when you get to the finish line. Again, just don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't do it. Just use that as motivation, but find out, do all the homework on people on how they made it, because it's not easy enough. Like I have people call me and say, "Oh, hire me in the NHL. Just don't pay me. Just I'll show you how." And that's not the way it works. You have to build a groundwork where you're not making any money and be really good at that in order to get to the NHL, where there is a financial gain that's so much different. So you just got to take the proper steps, and you can't skip any, because if you skip some, you can always go back and say, "Wow, I took a shortcut there." And sometimes that one shortcut that you take, or that one mistake that you make off the ice, because I didn't play, same thing. I had to be a really good citizen off the ice. I mean, you don't think about getting behind the car, the wheel of a car after a drink or something like that, or you're always doing the right things, because you realize, especially in the days of social media, if you don't present yourself properly, it could really trip you up, and it's not worth it to make those kind of mistakes and have your dream get, sideswept over something which is in your control.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. A lot of people, that's what's happening. They're finding things that they're doing online that's inappropriate, and then it ruins their whole career. And they might have been great, and they might have had great potential, and unfortunately a choice. But I love the fact that you had said that even the last year of high school, what did you say? You got suspended or something? And I mean, and it's like, see, but that doesn't matter. It didn't stop you from moving forward and still achieving. So if any parents out there, things aren't going right with your kids, have hope.
It's about hope. But it's funny, the year that I got suspended in hockey, when they did their hearing in that, I was immediately reinstated. And I went on that year to be the MVP of the league and most gentlemanly player. So I think there was a lot of things that went into it, that the people around knew that it was a blip on the radar screen for me. I was actually at the time doing something that my coach had asked me to do. And it was a stupid thing. He asked me, we were playing at Western Arena, and he asked me to score it. We were getting killed, and he was trying to distract, and he asked me to score a goal in our own net. Intentionally, which I wouldn't even, now I think, are you kidding me? But when you're impressionable and you do something like that, I did it, and I was suspended for making a travesty of hockey, and Yale was in the building that night, and they weren't impressed with the way it looked. And it was on sports. There was a show called Sportsline at night, and it was on, and it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
Hard.
It was bad, but I bounced back from it. And
you did.
Fortunately enough, people knew enough about me as a person to know that it was a blip. It wasn't something that there was a period of events that I got myself into trouble. That just wasn't my makeup. But no, it was good. I mean, I took pride in being captain of almost every team that I played for. And when
Amazing.
people instill you with that kind of leadership, that's when I know it's not just about looking after yourself. That's what I loved about hockey. It was about looking after your teammates. And it's amazing how many of my Henry Card teammates will reach out to me. Like even a good friend of mine, Ian Collins, was going through some stuff and he just had his first baby girl. And we just talked. Like he was talking to me about some of the stuff that he had to deal with, being a young black hockey player and how hard it was for him at the time. And now that he's a dad, how he's had to, how he's had to respond and evolve as a human being. And it's just amazing to think, how primitive some of the adults were back when we were younger with some of the stuff they say and use to motivate a young player to win a hockey game, as opposed to really looking at the big picture about you're really trying to produce a great young man as well. And I mean, I learned a lot of lessons along the way too about, I feel like I'm a really good listener and a really strong communicator when it comes to the players that come into my office. But I knew the big picture. I remember suspending one of our players in Owen Sound for constant abuse of alcohol. And I remember the fans losing it on me because this guy's a great player. The team isn't as good without him in the lineup. And I said, I've got to teach him a life lesson. And he ended up, 5 years ago, he killed someone drinking and driving, right? In a vehicular homicide. So, I did everything possible, but there were so many people pushing to don't worry about that. He's a good player. Don't worry about what he does away from the rink. He's a good player. And you hear as many great stories as you hear. Like two of my most proud moments to the players, and I'm sure your sons would know Wayne Simmons because he played for the Leafs. But Wayne, I brought him to Owen Sound as an undrafted player. Mm-hmm. Was never drafted. I ended up leaving and drafting him to Los Angeles, and then he became an NHL All-Star. He was never drafted anywhere else. He was overlooked in the draft. And then Mark Giordano, who's the captain of the Calgary Flames, a Rexdale kid, I signed him as a free agent in Owen Sound. He's still never been drafted anywhere. So if you want to have kids to dream about, everybody's, I didn't get drafted, I'm done. Well, he never got drafted in the Ontario Hockey League, and he just got through that adversity. Then he never got drafted in the National Hockey League, and he got through that adversity. And then he found a way to get himself. He just never gave up, took no shortcuts, finally made the Calgary Flames as a free agent, and now he's the captain of the Calgary Flames. And last year he won the Norris Trophy as the best defenseman in the National Hockey League. So
amazing. That's a great story.
Talk about dare to dream. And the thing about it, sometimes it's great to find great hockey players that do things great on the ice. But 2 years ago, the Marc Messier Leadership Award, which is basically for the most contributions to the community charity-wise and the base people, the two finalists were Wayne Simmons and Mark Giordano. So I felt, my God, that to me felt just as good as when I heard there's an NHL All-Star, because I wasn't wrong about them as people and as human beings. And when you find people that are that good and strong character-wise, it only makes me look better, but you just see what great family men they become. And that was the kind of pride stories with regards to the people you draft and the people you associate yourself with that make it all worthwhile.
Absolutely. And success is really all rounded, right? It's not just achieving one success. It's who are you? What are you doing, to pay it forward? It's so much more than just winning something.
Yeah. Pay it forward is one of those. Father McLean paid it forward for me. Even when I came back, I had sold my place in Vaughan in COVID. I didn't have a place. I had spoken at this gentleman's golf tournaments a couple of times. He was at one of my Stanley Cup parties, and all of a sudden he's like, I know you're going through a tough time not having your house anymore. He goes, I've got an empty home in King City. It's all yours. And it was like, pay it forward. So here I am in a beautiful home that my daughters can visit me while I'm in transition. Yeah. And then again, there was a story, going in your story, we do a lot of charity work and stuff, and you see a lot of things. And that was something that was completely new for me, but introduced through one of our players, Justin Williams in North Carolina. He introduced me. I came into the hotel when we were playing the Leafs, and there was this beautiful little girl, no hair in her head, in a wheelchair with her foot on upside down. And I was like, I was just dead. The smile was so radiant. I went over to her and I introduced myself and I met the family. But I remember particularly having an LA Kings toot, because I thought, wow, she's going to be cold in the rink with her little bald head there. And they told me the story how she had, when she lost her leg, because I said, why is the foot? And she her dream was to be a pro hockey player. And she'd gone through Haley Wickenheiser in her Dare to Dream. and Ryan Reynolds was her sponsor as well,
Yeah.
the actor.
Sick kids.
I
Yeah.
and I through Sick Kids, and I was like, wow. She had done it because when she couldn't play ice hockey, this was the only way her leg could fit into, so she could be a sledge hockey Olympian.
Oh,
And it was such an incredible story to see this little girl battle. And I always use her as when I have an woe is me moment.
yes.
I think about this young girl that her dream was to drop the puck at center ice. So I talked to the parents and I flew her down to Los Angeles with her mom and dad, and she ended up, Justin Williams was our honorary captain that night, and Mark Giordano. We were playing the Calgary Flames. So you talk about karma. They're the two captains that night, dropping the puck, and Amazing Grace brought out to center ice and dropped the puck, and the entire buildings, 18,000 people were chanting her name. And I had given her, a little, she was my guardian angel. So I'd given her a little angel, which she wore, and she came back. And unfortunately, I hate to use the term, she lost her battle with cancer,
Yes.
but I'm great close with Haley Wickenheiser, and every year when we came to Toronto, we would hospital for kid. A friend would donate a box, and my family would sit with Grace's family, and they have become one of the closest families ever. And everything I do charity wise, we've raised, like, we're up to over, between her foundation, my friends had put in, I think it was 15. We're well over $120,000 raised for the hospital for sick kids in the name of Amazing Grace Bowen. So those kind of stories.
Beautiful.
Oh, just perspective. I mean, I was asked to speak.
Yes.
I delivered the eulogy at her funeral, and it was one of the hardest moments. When I went in, I was absolutely shivering because it was an open casket. But the first thing I noticed was my angel on her peacefulness. And it was like, I remember at the church, my first word was, my name is Michael, and I'm a Graceaholic. I still get choked. And Haley, I become best friends with Haley about it. But it just puts things into perspective again, because that little girl would have, if you'd seen the way she lit up her room with her energy, she would have achieved anything.
Well, she already did, right? Look at that. Look at the way she touched you. You touching her, but she touched you.
Everybody. But and that's the thing. Like, it's like, whenever you say it's past, as much as it's sad, it puts it in perspective. So if I'm gonna, like, I just find, when I start to feel sorry for myself, or when you steer a little bit, or the thing doesn't always go your way, I always think of her, right? And think of what her life had left to offer. And I don't ever want my daughters to take shortcuts that way or feel sorry for themselves. And maybe we're always emotionally, we're going to have times where we feel sorry for ourselves, but to be strong and get through it, because there's better days ahead. And some people haven't had that opportunity to advance with their life at a young age. So it brings a lot of perspective.
It's true. How, in regards to goal setting, how do you goal set for yourself, or help for yourself, and then in turn, do you help your kids goal set?
It's just be realistic, for one thing, but realistic is not in the sense of don't sell yourself short. Like, I knew what I wanted to do the second that I got behind the bench and started to scout players and run drafts. I knew that was my ultimate goal. I wanted to be a National Hockey League, either in management. I wanted to get there. And then obviously, when you win there's only one position higher that I haven't achieved as far as your status, and that's the general manager position. As I said, I've interviewed numerous times. I was offered one that I turned down, and that's my ultimate goal. But just to get back at it, to be part of a team, to be part of that, again, it's to set your goals that by treating people the way you want to be treated, it transfers. Like, and by judging good people, like when you're team building and you're looking at the elements you want to put on your team, on your ice hockey team, it all comes down to one thing. I mean, they're all great players by that stage. It's the ones with character that put you over, and that even when you lose, they never make you look bad because of their work ethic and the way they handle themselves. And I always use the analogy that I always wanted kids that they worked their hardest when the teacher wasn't in the room. Because there's always people that just grind it out when the supervisor's there, and then as soon as they leave, they start their shortcuts, or they don't finish their reps in the gym, or they cheat on an assignment because they're not being watched. I wanted to know that when I was drafting somebody, they worked just as hard or harder when I wasn't in the room. And then that they're so easy to motivate when you're on the ice. When you fail and you left it on the ice, or all in the field, or all in the classroom, and then you can look yourself square in the eye and say, well, let's get at it, or dust yourself off, but you didn't let yourself down. It's when you take those shortcuts and fail, or don't do the work and fail, and then get upset that you failed. Well, realistically, Peter Miller used to always say, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. And if you got to dot your I's and cross your T's along the way, in order to even have a chance. And as I said, there's going to be some times where if you just think I want to be in the National Hockey League because I'm going to make a lot of money, that's not going to get you there. The only way you're going to get there is if you're willing to make not a lot of money and put in the amount of hours like you're making a lot of money
before you make the money.
Before you make it. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the most interesting thing for me, because people there's in every aspect of life, there's people that legitimately feel good for you and are happy for you where your story ended up. And then there's people that are jealous. Or if a friend of mine has succeeded, whether we're competitors or not, I'm thrilled for them. I'm
I
thrilled.
know. We need more people like that. I was so excited for you. I'm like, that's like one for the team. It's like, yeah, it's for Henry Cards to say that, there is talent out there everywhere. Don't say you need to be someone from the States or there, I was so excited for you. Like, well, when you goal set, do you, some people, they visually look at their goal setting. They have something that they look at every day. Do you use any of those strategies to help you get?
For me, in this case, there's so many different case studies, right? Like, there's only 30 teams in the world. Like, it's a little different. I mean, if you're like, whatever, if I wanted to be a doctor, like, there's millions of doctors and they're all have to go through specific fields. So you can go back complex when there's only a finite group of teams, right? And jobs, like, there's only 30 assistant general manager jobs in the world in the NHL, right? So you have to really look at the different people that might have had the same playing background, and then what did they do along the way to get there? You've got to follow other paths just so you've got everything covered. Ultimately, you're going to have to use your own personality, your own work ethic, your own traits. You've got to be so respectful of the game, of the people that played it. Like, if I walked into a meeting with 3 NHL Hall of Famers and I acted like I was the boss, those guys would never want to work for me. But if they look at my body of work and how hard I work to get to the National Hockey League. And now when I'm in the process of showing them, teaching great players how to evaluate and how to conduct interviews and how to conduct practices, and you do it with a sense of humility and respect, they're going to be responsive. And for the most part, you get that, because in anything, there's going to be certain people that get promoted because of their reputation or what they did. Like, there's so many great NHL players that get put in roles because they were great players that haven't done the work to be great executives. And ultimately, they usually get exposed because it's not an easy job if you haven't done the work. Whereas you get a guy like a Steve Yzerman, who was one of the great players in the world, but before he became a great general manager, he did every little job along the way. Like, I'd be in Moscow and look across and I'd be, wow, there's Steve Yzerman sitting in the corner scouting players. Like, that's amazing to think that he's worked just as hard to become an NHL general manager as he did become a Hall of Famer. And those are the stories that are just, for me, are great. But again, it's doing the homework and doing all the little stops along the way to get to the goal to make it even realistic. It's one thing to say, I'm going to become this. And that's what I say, like, when I talk to my daughters about, and they're at an age, they're obviously at 16 and 14, that their goals could change. Right. But I also said, just don't, like, so many people have said to me, like, your girls, why did you never get them into hockey? And I'm like, because they never wanted to be hockey players. You know what I mean? You find what their passions are, and each one of them is drastically different in what their passions are. At one point, it was all just get them all into soccer. Right. And now just my oldest loves soccer. So that's a passion she has. So if she wants to pursue a soccer scholarship, we've got to look at all the different avenues. But women's soccer is not going to financially take you to another level. So you have to have what academically, what passion do you have that's going to take you to another level where you're so happy doing what you're doing. It happens for my oldest daughter. She's an absolutely brilliant artist and a designer. Like, she won best designer and best athlete in her graduation, right? So she's got, and I see the painting she does and stuff like that. So for her to somehow find a down the road employment opportunity or dream, or to set a goal to get there that's realistic. The easiest thing is, Josie, if you truly are passionate and you enjoy it. I don't know how people succeed at something that they just can't stand. When you hear the people, I hate my job, or I hate my job. I mean, it's so difficult to imagine, when it pays well, but I hate it. If eventually, I think that's just got to grind you into again, not everybody can love their job. But if you put your time in, you should really be able to at least give yourself an opportunity to open some doors in something that you're very passionate about. And I'm convinced if I had to stay along the lines of a school teacher, I would have found a way to make any department that I was involved in want me to be the coach of their team or something like because I
You
did
were
so.
destined to go in that direction.
I remember one of the teachers becoming so ticked off because, and then there were so many teachers, like there was if you remember a guy named Mr. Slana, John Slana, and he just passed away last year. And Mr. Slana used to drive the school bus, like he'd drive the van and take us to all our games. And he was he loved the stories. I told him, sir, you put me to sleep in your class, your history class, but you're such a great and the amount of fun we had outside of his classroom, him and Quigley, Mr. Quigley, and both
I
of them
remember
passed.
Quigley.
But they're just, it was incredible to think how much of a role they played in just wanting to be around the students just as much when the school bell exited. Like you see these teachers that would just hit the car and gone, whereas others, that's really when their fun started, when the bell ended and they got to be around students in sporting or whatever it was, whether it was music, sporting. It was incredible. And I mean, to think Mr. Slana, who again just passed last year, he was at both my Stanley Cup parties. Like
really,
he showed up as a teacher from I had Mr. These guys were showing up to take a picture of their grade 11 history student. Those kind of people, you take a little bit from all of them.
You do.
Because they were such good leaders. They made you want to do well in school because it was a necessity for you to do well to even open the door for your next challenge.
Your humility and your ability to acknowledge all the people that helped you and opened doors and encouraged you. I mean, I'm sure that is one of the reasons why you excelled, because your people skills, your communication skills, and people sometimes thinks it's just skills in that particular area, but it's not. It's the whole picture. The communication and people skills is so important that our kids are learning that in your example to your own kids. Being humble, you're teaching them a lot just by the way you're behaving around other people, the way you're seeing life, taking things in perspective, in a different perspective, like that little girl, Grace. You try to refocus your life when things aren't always going your way, and you put things in perspective. Right there is teaching your kids that, hey, life is not always going to go your way, but let's put things back into perspective because things are good, or things will be good again.
I think the other thing is if you take your role of being a parent, treat it with such dignity and respect, whether your marriage was a success or not, your role as a parent is so critical. And the little thing you say or the example you set could change their lives dramatically forever, and positive or a negative way. And that's one thing I was so blessed, still blessed. As I said, my parents have been married 56 years. They had me by 50 years actually. But they're still, like, my mom is my best friend in the world.
Wonderful.
We call her the wind beneath our wings, the family glue, but she's the most wonderful, selfless human being that I've ever met. And I want my daughters to be around her as much as they can. And she's got lots of life left in her, but I want them rubbing next to that. She's just such a wonderful, wonderful human being. And again, she would do anything for her children. She would scold you in such a peaceful way just to let you know that that's probably not the route you want to go down. That's when I would get the Michael, and didn't listen all, but she just always had myself and my sister, who's another wonderful human being, and their thoughts. And my dad was tough. I mean, he was one of those guys that he was a principal and a phys ed teacher, but they put him in all the schools with all the badasses. So he was the disciplinarian, right? And I think sometimes he brought that home a little bit. And that was tough because I think so many students had, like, he was going down, being called down to take, there's a gun in Portable 2, like at Jane Junior High. So it was a different, but he had a chance to, get his doctorate of education. He did so many things for our family. He was an all-Canadian tight end in university. He coached hockey, and then he ended up superintendent of schools for Dufferin Peel, went on and ran his own university in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. But for me, he was really hard on me to a point that there was a certain point that he was driving me away from hockey, right? And it was because I was taking shortcuts in retrospect, and he was acknowledging it. But it was like I didn't even want to get in the car with him after games. It was so hard. And I mean, I'd look up during games to get thumbs up or thumbs down, and it was like that meant the world to me. And if I got thumbs down, I was devastated. And it was getting off where hockey wasn't fun. Paul Dennis, Mr. Dennis, breathed life back into it. for me at Henry Carr. And then, my dad just kind of got away from being my hockey guy and just became my dad. And then everything just took off, because I knew now, looking back, everything he did was just to wake me up. I mean, he didn't want me to take those shortcuts that I took as a player. And I carried that lesson on to not taking any shortcuts. And I think now it's just how proud he is of, I mean, again, to sit there and look in the basement, this shrine my mom's built, and, the rings and the trophies and the, all my mini cups, my rings are up at their place, and how proud he is, and they watch all the podcasts and all the Sportsnet, and it's just how proud I'm proud that he's my dad. So it's a relationship that was so different than my mom, but has evolved into just, he'd do anything for me as a parent, and he was a great role model with his work ethic. I'm still not a big fan of and you probably would have seen it in the Italian culture, when you come home from work, dinner's ready and everybody around serves the master of the house. That's never been something, but you know what? That's what he was brought up in. And he's evolved into such a more loving and understanding person. And I'm proud of him for it. And I still see how much fun he and my mom have together. And it's kind of a blessing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's wonderful. What do you remember your mother? How was she encouraging you?
Just that. Well, first of all, she was the soft landing when my dad was being the hard guy with hockey, because she knew how much I loved it.
So you had the combination, might have been good, right?
Good blend, but she was also like, we laugh because I remember, like, remarkably, it's a Henry Carr story, because the old house parties that we used to have, and I remember my dad going away for a weekend, which he was supposed to be gone the whole weekend, and my mom saying, we should have a party. So my mom and I think her mom at the time might have been, I don't know if Grammy, she was there or not, but my mom for sure was. And I think half of Henry Carr was on our street and in our backyard pool. And I still remember somebody coming up. My heart dropped, and my dad had decided to come home early. Well, the entire school was partying on our street. So that was an interesting one, considering that my mom kind of ordered the pizzas and helped arrange the thing. So, but
you can't get too much trouble.
It was a trying moment, but we got through the night but I know the next day the trust factor was a little waned. But she always wanted the best for us, would do anything, whether she was just so loving. She was just a great listener for all, like, just in every aspect. I mean, there was never anything that she would not do for us, in any capacity. And then the balance there of having my dad, the breadwinner, showing what important was to be the patriarch figure. But again, it was just the support.
Sounds like she was a good listener, you said? Being a good listener was an important thing?
Incredible listener and an incredible communicator, and still is. Whereas my dad didn't listen so much as he just communicated. When I think of where I'm at, there's no possible way I could have got to where I'm at without the way my dad was. With me, my competitive nature, like, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy, but when it comes to competing on the ice or in management, and you're it's under control, but it's fierce. That between the lines, and sometimes you have to rear it back, because now especially cameras are always on you, and you don't want to, sometimes you see guys throwing stuff around in the box and after a loss, or getting on referees and losing your composure. And I've got that kind of stuff, but that ferocity didn't come from my mom. It came from the competitive nature of my dad. And if I didn't have that, I never wouldn't. You've got to be able to be in the sporting world. You better be competitive, or you're going to get eaten alive. But you can be competitive and do it with class and respect. And that's the route I wanted to go. And I think that's a combination of my mom and my dad.
Absolutely. And it sounds, knowing that your mom was such a great communicator, and so she opened up for you to talk to her, and you mentioned she was a good listener. And I think parents need to realize, sometimes some parents say, well, I'm the boss, this is my house, this is my rules. And I get that. And we've said that sometimes too, but we need to communicate and listen, and we don't listen enough sometimes, parents. And so I love the fact that you really point out that her listening was very critical for you, and the communication, open communication.
Yeah. And I don't think for the most part either, Josie, I agree with you 100%. And I don't think for the most part the kids respond to, you don't know what it was like, you don't know how I had it, or what I had to do, or, you know what? That's not going to change what happened. I mean, I'm sure at one point everybody needs to hear how your parent was brought or what their upbringing was like. I mean, I'm very fortunate, again, as I said, knock on wood, I've got so many of my friends have lost their parents, and I've got both my parents, right? So my granddaughters get to see the people that brought me into the world, and how, what a wonderful, like they can clearly see that my mom is the best. They say it. One of the few things that me and my ex-wife agree on is that my mom is probably the nicest human being that we've ever seen, which is, that speaks volumes for my mom, right?
Yes.
So it's a special thing. But I think if you just sit there and say, oh yeah, well, you don't know what I had, I had to take the bus and I had to do this and I didn't have what you had and you've got this and you've got this, so be happy. That just doesn't work. Kids want to, I mean, in the past, I used the analogy when I used to talk about players, like coaches would say, okay, run through that wall. And then the old school would just run through the wall and not ask any questions. The new school is now they walk up to the wall and they want to know what the wall's made of. And then they want to Google wall. And well, what's going to happen when I get on the other side of the wall? So it's like, you've got to be prepared, and you can't just at that stage say, just do it. You have to be prepared to have the answers as to why this is the best option for you. And I think if you present the best, if you have the answers and you've done your homework on the questions your kids are asking you, and you're not just winging it with old school stuff, at least it's the same thing, that you've done your homework and you think you're giving your kids good advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's so true. I really enjoyed hearing your perspective on, what you went through, some of your stories, and how you grew up with your parents, and I'm excited for your kids and see, what's going to happen in their future, because they have an example of someone who truly looks at the whole picture of what success is. Looking at the person as a human being and how we're being with others, and then try not to do shortcuts, because that seems to have been a very important lesson in your life, to try to educate yourself in whatever field it was that you were excited about. And it sounds like the advice you're giving parents out there is, if they want to go in a certain field, and look at people who are successful in that field, and how they achieve that success. And I enjoyed reading your bio on how you came to where you're at, because it was like, what, for people who want to do hockey, it's like, just because you didn't get there yet, there's other ways to achieve it. And I mean, you got to see 2 Stanley Cups, and you were part of that team.
I always loved the word team. It was something about being a part of a team. And then teams relate to me to family, right? That's your team, that's your squad. And how are you going to get the best out of your teammates? How are you going to get the best out of your, you plan as a family, you plan as a team. Your ultimate goal is to win a championship. Well, it's not just going to happen. How are we going to get all of our individuals on board to achieve that goal? And those kind of things just thrill me and excite me. The ability to, when a teammate's down, to find ways, to look into their past, to find out, what's bothering them away from the rink. It's obviously not just always about ice time. Like, you might not know what's going on at that person's house, or what's been wrong with their day. And to just judge. It's always one of those things. It's like, I have a pet peeve that when people who have no idea what you're doing now, everybody now, we used to communicate by, I don't even know what a home phone looks like anymore. And everybody's got cell phones, everybody's texting, there's 900 different devices. People that text you, and like, I'd be literally like in the middle of a meeting with like 20 people, and you just kind of check your text, because you always, especially when you have kids, and it shows that you've read it, but you don't respond right away, right? And then the person on the other end, you start to get, oh, I see you read my text. What, you don't have time to respond? Those are the kind of short-sightedness people that you have to put into perspective what everybody else is going through. And I think people like that, I always thought they'd probably be better in individual sports, which there's nothing wrong with individual sports, because, but if you think about it, like they say golf's an individual sport, but you know what? The higher level you get, how much a professional golfer requires his caddy, how important his caddy is with the yardage to turn it into. So it's really a team sport. It is a team sport. There's not too many sports that you're just on your own and that's it. It's just you. You either need great coaches or great team, whether it's race car driving or in everything. And that just, for me, I love the aspect of a team sport and realizing that you got to get everybody going in the right direction. You don't want to take any shortcuts. If somebody's not pulling their weight, that you can find a positive way to motivate them to start pulling their weight. And I always relate that back to family, and the same thing with a family. You want to have goals as a family. And if you're just telling people how it is and not listening, it's going to be hard to get them to reach their ultimate goals. There's got to be as much listening as there is talking.
Yeah, and it sounds like that, well, we need to help our kids to make sure that their communication skills are up there, that they're learning how to work as a team in the family unit, because then they take it out to the fields that they go into and they can excel more.
If your kids are afraid to tell you what's on their mind and what's bothering them, that's concerning.
Yeah,
That's concerning. You've got to provide an environment where the freedom, your listening skills are there, that if something's happened to them away from the school or something, that they're just not, they know they have parents that they can go to that are going to listen and not judge. They're going to
right.
listen.
Not judging is the important part too, that I think parents need to hear.
Yeah.
Not judging, because they'll come more to you if you're not judging. If you're judging, they're going to say, oh, I'm not going to go next time.
Yeah, like if your first thing is a scream at them, what that could cost you, and not just listen, and then eventually get to the repercussions of doing that again, whether it was something wrong or even trying to deal with somebody that might be bullying them. There's so many different facets now. They've got to be so comfortable with their surroundings that they can always come to mom and dad to get what's on their mind and get help or get advice.
Yeah, if we're comfortable in our skin, or if we can move through obstacles through talking and with family support, I mean, I think we can excel in anything we put our mind to. And that's so important. And I see that, that's probably one of the reasons you've achieved, is that you are able to talk through things with your family. And
It does require opportunity, but if you handle yourself well in all aspects of your life, usually an opportunity presents itself, and then it's what you do with the opportunity.
absolutely. Well, you know what? I just want to thank you. Thank you, Michael, for sharing. We've got a lot of good nuggets here. Thank you for sharing your experience with us, so that we parents can also help our children to open their mind to the possibilities, to know that it's important to encourage them to work in a field that excites them, that they have passion for, just like you have passion for hockey. Parents out there, I want to remind you that what you say, what you do, your kids are being influenced. So parents, remember, you make a difference.